My favorite rapper, Rakim, said, "It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you." Well, I am so sorry that it's been 2 weeks since I've gone dark, rogue, and off the grid with another Elizabeth Holmes trial update. I'm going to provide an update in this video and provide a specific example of how Theranos' conduct is exactly like the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It's remarkable. I'm going to break down that analogy for you as I get into the blog we produce at Prison Professors. Before I begin or continue, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and comment. If you're listening to our Prison Professors podcast, thank you. Thank you very much for your attention and time. We want to help and inform you on the system from our experience of traversing the criminal justice system and provide that angle that only we can provide because everyone on our team has been on the wrong side of prison boundaries, something Miss Holmes may soon endure and experience. So let's jump right into this screen share technology with the click of a button, getting to the Holmes criminal fraud trial number 8. In this case, we're going to talk about, or in this blog, we're going to talk about the lab director that Holmes and Balwani hired. Was it done in name only? Certainly the prosecutors are arguing it was only in name only. Her defense team is going to do what her defense team does well. It was all Balwani. It was all Balwani. Stop giving Miss Holmes a tough time here, please. It was Balwani. It was Balwani. And if you're really wondering whose fault it was, if you're really concerned about whose fault it was Balwani. Now, let's get more into the specifics of this blog, or video. The prosecution is continuing to bring out witnesses that state that Theranos misrepresented to the public, investors, doctors, and patients that its proprietary finger prick blood testing technology was a no-go. It was a fraud. It didn't work. The defense continues to forcefully cross-examine witnesses, trying to pick and point holes and this and that and do what defense attorneys do. We did have a lab director take the stand. As we know from our prior videos, Dr. Adam Rosendorff left Theranos in 2014 and became the whistleblower. Good on him. Theranos at that time needed a new lab director. Since Theranos' fortunes depended on its ability to show that it had rolled out groundbreaking technology, the role of the lab director was critical. Not critical enough that they actually hired someone with the requisite skill set, not critical enough that they actually hired someone who could do it full time. It wasn't that critical to Balwani and Holmes, though I suspect they were telling a different message to their shareholders, to their investors, to Walgreens, an investor, and of course, a different message to the state audit that I'm going to get into in just a few minutes. Holmes and Balwani filled this vacant role with Sunil Dhawan, a dermatologist, who said he knew Theranos executive Balwani because he had treated him as a patient for 15 years. Looking back at his role now, it would appear, if you have a brain, that Holmes and Balwani looked to place a trusted doctor and friend in this role rather than an actual medical expert in blood testing technology. The Wall Street Journal reports that in 2014, Balwani asked Dhawan to serve as temporary lab director as a favor, assuring Dhawan that he could continue with his dermatology practice or his family life. At that time, Theranos, a company then worth hundreds of millions of dollars, hired a part-time, potentially unqualified lab director. So I am going to share some thoughts on this for a moment before I continue. And in this white-collar crime world that our team at Prison Professors has been immersed in for 13 years, it's important to understand that the pressures that executives face, the way that people rationalize their decisions, and of course the opportunity. I'll talk about that in a moment. So we know Balwani and Holmes, they're marketers. They were fundraisers. They didn't have the skill set to deliver on this technology they had promised. They're marketers, nothing more. That's it. So marketers sell the benefits. So this Sunil, this doctor, the dermatologist, clearly had concerns about his limited capacity, his skill set. So what did Balwani and Holmes do? They sell the benefits as marketers. It's a part-time job. You can continue to do your other business. We have a whole team around you that's going to help. This is the perfect role for you. And by the way, we're going to pay you a whole lot of money. You don't need to research the company. It's fine. It's me. It's Balwani. You've been my dermatologist for 15 years. It's me. We're friends. We hang out. That's what people do. They leverage off people's pain points. They find their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, and they exploit them. So all of you, as we teach in our business training or compliance training, as executives, we need to know our tendencies as human beings, because there are people who will exploit it. There are people who will leverage off it like they have a sixth sense for it. And Balwani and Holmes were able to find that pressure point, help that person rationalize it. And of course, in this case, Sunil sees the opportunity to work as a part-time lab director in a job that, of course, should require a full-time position. I'm hitting my desk just to really show you how important it should have been for Balwani and Holmes to hire someone full-time. But of course, they didn't do that because they didn't want the accountability that would come from it. The dude who did that position before left and became a whistleblower, and he's testifying and crushing the defense. So you could see why they wanted someone who was a patsy, you could argue, and they found his sixth sense and they leveraged off him to get him to come on board. And I know they really stress, hey, this is a part-time job. It's going to be for a little while till we fill the role full-time. That's the way that they can, that's the way they could advance their agenda. Now I'm going to come back to the screen share now that I've one off script for a moment. I'm going to come back to the blog. Now, something the defense is going to do, and if I were the defense attorney, I would do it well. Actually, in the next video I'm going to film, I'm going to break down a huge mistake the defense made. But coming back to this blog, the defense is doing, of course, what they're expected to do, which is to argue that Sunil, the dermatologist, was a board certified doctor. Technically, he met state and federal requirements to be a lab director. That's what they're going to do. They're also, of course, going to say that it was Balwani who hired him based on the 15 years, and Holmes had absolutely nothing to do with it. She didn't have anything to do with him until it was time for the state audit, I'm going to get into in a moment. The truth is the prosecutors are attempting to argue in front of the jury, he did not have the proper background or expertise. Dhawan was not board certified in laboratory science. He had no prior experience in running a lab of the scale or scope of Theranos. Before getting recruited by Balwani, he knew nothing about Theranos or its blood testing technology, and he had to use Google to get a basic idea. So don't bother meeting with Balwani or Holmes to learn more about the company that you'll be running the lab on. Instead, let's go to Google, who we know gets everything right, because everything on Google has to be true. I mean, if it's there, it's true. It's on Google. So let's just go learn about this company I'm going to be the lab director for from Google, rather than meeting with the board. Where's the board in all of this? Are they here? Where's the board? I was trying to look for something for effect here, but all I have is a cup of coffee. Hold on a second. It's absurd, right? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. Let's continue. Dhawan agreed to serve as the lab director in minimal capacity. That's probably how he made himself feel better, knowing that he wasn't qualified, knowing that he can continue to be a dermatologist, knowing that he'd been leveraged off of Balwani. What made him feel better was, I'm going to do this in a minimum capacity for a short window. He told the jury that he visited the lab a couple of times and barely met or spoke to any employees, patients, or doctors in his role. He said he spent 5 or 10 hours performing the role from November 14 to the summer of 2015. I mean, it's not even a job. I share the story of a friend of mine in college who wanted to be an actor, and he was so funny and great and talented. And I said, well, dude, how many hours a week do you spend on acting? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you want to be a full-time actor. How many hours a week do you spend on acting? It's like, I don't know. I go to like 3 auditions a week. I'm like, how long is each audition? He's like, I don't know. I wait in line for 6 hours. The audition is 10 minutes. So I said, in other words, you want to be a full-time actor, but you're spending 30 minutes a week perfecting your craft. And he's like, yeah, that sounds about right. Well, it's kind of what we have here, right? You have someone who's a full-time director who spent 5 or 10 hours. It's utterly absurd. So it's clear, at least the government's positioning, that it's clear to the jury that Holmes and Balwani, Theranos, I think I said Theranos several thousand times now. It's going to get to the point where it's like a B and hello and hi, how are you? I've said it so many times. It's clear Theranos hired a patsy, a figurehead, essentially renting his medical license is covered. Now, in a moment, I'm going to get into how Theranos is just like federal prison. It's clear the former lab director, Rosendorff, when he quit, had been more hands-on, that he was the real role of a lab director, and he brought a level of accountability and scrutiny to Holmes and Balwani that they didn't want. So when they saw an opportunity to bring in someone who very much kind of like window dressing is the way that I would describe it. As a former stockbroker before I went to prison, a lot of money managers would window dress. In other words, they put high performing stocks in their portfolio the last day or two of the quarter. So when investors see the portfolio, they see the big names that have been performing well, even though that quarter's performance really wasn't because of the stocks that are now in the portfolio. This was nothing more than window dressing to claim they had a lab director, a physician who had the requisite materials, though in the day-to-day functioning, he did nothing to advance their agenda, nothing to prove worthy of the investment that Walgreens and people were making into this company. It was a ruse. It was a fraud. They're charlatans, or so the government says. Let's get back to the state audit now for a minute as we wrap up this Elizabeth Holmes trial number 8. Around 2015, Dhawan's contact with Theranos increased as the company prepared for a state audit of its lab. In that regard, Dhawan was asked to sign many documents and was physically present at the lab on the day of the inspection. This is exactly how Theranos is like federal prison. 5 to 10 hours he spent there from November 2014 to summer of 15. Yet on the day of the inspection, he was a go. He was there full time. He gave the impression that he was running this lab successfully. Around that time, he finally met Holmes for the first time. Why? Not because she had interest in teaching him about the company. He had to go to Google for that. They met because they had to ensure that he was ready to pass the state inspection, including signing 300 standard operating procedure forms. I don't know if you're there for 5 or 10 hours over a course of a year, how you're prepared to sign 300 operating procedure forms when it's a part-time gig for you. He did say his lab director, he didn't meet her until September 2015, around the time of the inspection. So why it's just like federal prison. Federal prison staff doesn't really have interest in the prisoner. They don't really have interest in preparing people for a law-abiding life upon release. I'm not complaining. People in prison should be self-directed, self-paced. There are certainly pockets of staff that care, but in reality, education in prison is abhorrent. It's sickening. Look at how many people return to prison after they've been released. I mean, recidivism in this country is a disaster. It's a shame. Yet when there would be an inspection of the federal prison, staff would go all hands on deck like Theranos did. Staff would be dressed nicely. They would speak nicely to the prisoners. They would say, if asked by one of the auditors, if you like education, the food, the program, and if we treat you nice, please say yes. And as a thank you, we'll give you an extra, hard-boiled egg out of the chow hall, or we'll give you an extra movie. We're going to give you some extra popcorn as a thank you. So it's window dressing again. It's lying, giving the representation or misrepresentation that they're caring for prisoners, when in reality they are not. They're simply trying to pass this audit so their funding can continue. No different than Holmes and Balwani conning this Dhawan to sign up for the inspection and to give the impression that it's all good, when in reality it wasn't. It was not all good, and they know it. And you could argue the defense will claim, well, that's not criminal. They might have not hired the right person with the right skill set, but he was licensed. That's true. And this one specific thing isn't enough to convict, but it speaks to the pattern over a period of many, many years of Balwani and Holmes putting themselves first to the detriment of others, primarily their investors, but more importantly, their patients turned victims. Continuing on with cross-examination, Holmes's lawyer asked Dhawan about co-defendant Balwani. The lawyer said he was running the laboratory from an operational standpoint, correct? And Dhawan said, I can't comment on that because I was never told he was running the lab, but it was my assumption he was, yeah. To counter Dhawan's testimony about his minimal activities as lab director, Holmes' defense team revealed that another lab director existed alongside Dhawan, at least on paper. Lynette Sawyer, a public health director, also held the job title of Theranos' lab director in 2014 and 2015. Her name was added to the lab license on November 9, 2014, around the same time they had recruited Dhawan. That, of course, begs the question, was Sawyer just another lab director in name only? When Sawyer was cross-examined, she said Dhawan did not know about her. Think about that for a moment. You've hired another lab director that doesn't know the other lab director. Not really a spirit of communication or collaboration or openness or transparency at Theranos here. It's just utterly absurd. And I actually think it works against the defense that they tried to bring this person up, that she too is qualified, when in reality there was no connection with this other lab director. It doesn't make any sense. Critically, Dhawan did not know that Sawyer had also signed Theranos' lab documents. You'd think the lab director would. Jurors saw other Theranos documents showing that Sawyer's name was removed from the license in August 2015, around the time that Dhawan said he began getting asked to sign dozens of lab approvals in advance of a federal regulator audit. On cross-examination, Holmes' defense team also suggested that the Theranos lab employed many full-time people and that it's normal for lab directors to rely on staff. Of course, that's the whole message. That's their whole argument, that I'm not responsible for what people beneath me do. It's just, I'm the CEO. I have so many responsibilities. I can't be responsible for what my minions say and do beneath me, but I will take the credit and go on the cover of Inc. and Forbes, and I will roll with Jim Cramer on Mad Money for a little while to talk about how fantastic I am. And I will sit next to the president and have him lionize me for creating a company at 19 after taking 2 classes at Stanford. That I will accept, but I will not accept the responsibility of actually supervising my employees. To conclude this blog, prosecutors are going to argue that Theranos' lab directors, after Rosendorff quit, were there in name only. No qualified board certified lab professional was put in place to monitor Theranos' blood testing on patients and ensure compliance with regulations. Balwani, chief operating officer, hired Dhawan to rubber stamp lab paperwork. I think that's pretty clear. According to the prosecutor's theory of the case, although as a board certified doctor, Dhawan technically met the requirements, he lacked the experience to do so. Balwani is going to have his place in front of the jury in spring of 22. In the interim, Miss Holmes and her team will continue to blame Balwani. I will wrap up this video with something I mentioned a little earlier. A lot of people get in trouble and become immersed in the criminal justice system because they get leveraged off of or exploited by people who can find your weakness, who can find that sixth sense. So I beg all of you to be fully aware of your tendencies, to fully understand your tendencies. Are you a pleaser? Are you arrogant? Is it your way or the highway? People pleasers get run over in life. That's why there's a lot of them in federal prison who didn't wake up with bad intent, yet they get pushed to do something like Balwani because as a marketer, as he and Holmes are, they find the benefits, they find the salient points, and they sell it hard and they push. And in the end, a lot of people endure and suffer the consequences. Again, thank you so much for watching Elizabeth Holmes trial update number 8. I will return with Elizabeth Holmes trial update number 9 and talk about the relationship with Walgreens and how that also went rogue. Again, please like, subscribe, and comment. And if you're rolling through traffic and on our Prison Professors podcast, you're awesome. You're all awesome. Thank you so much for coming to our channel. We know you're busy. More value to come. Be safe. Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.